From managing hundreds of agents at Purplebricks to helping grow Yopa's self-employed model, Tom Greenacre has seen the industry evolve from every angle. In this episode, we dig deep into the lessons he's learned, the mistakes he's made, and what it really takes to succeed as a self-employed estate agent in today's market. Hope you enjoy the podcast. Tom, welcome to the podcast. So you have spent about a decade over at Spicerhaart. You certainly worked your way up the ladder there, to say the least, which is absolutely amazing to see. What initially drew you towards Spicerhaart, and what were your main learnings you took away from being there?
Yeah, look, so I originally started my career like probably everybody does at Countrywide down in the Southwest. Had a really good start to my career. The training there was fantastic. But like most people, I wanted to get ahead. So I accelerated my career quite quickly there, became a branch manager. And then a really exciting opportunity came up within Spicerhaart to look after a small amount of offices and then grow from there. So for me, it made perfect sense. It was a fresh challenge. It was a new challenge. It was a chance for me to cut my teeth on a multi-branch scale, for want of a better phrase. Looking after different offices, different locations, different challenges, and see if I could do it. Really, that was my initial thought process. Is take the opportunity, seize it with both hands, jump on board, and take it from there. And I've got to say that during my time at Spicerheart, I really felt my career go from strength to strength. To be fair.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? I think for the number of guests I have on the podcast, and everyone's done a stint at Countrywide, whether it's 6 months or 6 years, everyone's done some time at Countrywide at some point in their property career. Looking back at your time sort of within sort of Countrywide and Spicer Hearts, were there any sort of key moments or lessons or sort of mentors you looked at that sort of change your approach to sort of leadership over that time?
Yeah, I suppose key moments that I look back on is, especially countrywide, is that you get taught a real grounding in a state agency. Whereas now, obviously, look, we've got things that make our lives a hell of a lot easier, such as this medium, Zoom, WhatsApp, all those sorts of things. Whereas back then, it was very much you had to speak to as many people as humanly possible. You had an applicant box that you had to keep regularly updated. And that for me was a really good grounding because he who made the most telephone calls typically won. And it was just all about making sure that you spoke to as many people as possible, whether that's from the office using the phone or out knocking on doors, to really grow your local profile. So actually the fundamental basics of estate agency haven't changed, just the way in which you contact people have. So I suppose the first thing for me to acknowledge is my grounding in the industry was a brilliant one. Got taught everything I needed to know from a really early stage. And a lot of that was around how to interact with customers, when to contact them, how to contact them, and all that sort of stuff. And then moving on to leadership, I was lucky enough to work with Russell Jervis, who you'll be aware of. Learned some really good things from him around differing ways to lead people, how to motivate them, all those sorts of things that make a difference. And then progressively, as my career's evolved, you pick up different things from different people, don't you? But certainly there were two sides to it. The countrywide element was more about the branch I was in, which is quite straightforward really when you're looking after people under one roof. But then when you get into multi-branch management, um, it becomes a lot harder. So I was really fortunate. I was able to draw a lot of knowledge off Russell Jervis.
And when you look back at your time there, sort of whether it was looking after one branch or multiple branches there, was there any particular sort of activity or direction the company went in that really moved the needle forward? So you mentioned there about sort of obviously lead generation and getting out there and sort of hitting the phones and that sort of stuff. Was that the biggest focus? And it's kind of like numbers in the top equals numbers at the bottom, or was there anything particularly kind of focused on over that time to kind of move that needle a bit further forward?
For me, yeah, look, if I'm totally honest, of course, the drive was always to get valuations into the business. And you had to do those by getting your hands dirty, of course, getting out there, speaking to people on the market with other agents. That's not changed. We still do that now. Looking after your leads that came in, that was an absolute prerequisite. We were absolutely fixated on dealing with things like right move leads instantaneously when they came in. And that's just so important, particularly if you want to be the first to the punch with regards to having and talking to a customer about selling their own property. But like with everything, the one thing that it really taught me was everything revolves around people. Property is a people business. So if you have brilliant people following the right processes, typically you'll get some great results and everyone will be, achieving what they want to achieve, whether that's career acceleration, whether that's being able to afford to do nice things in their personal life, or whether it's just having an absolute feel good factor that they love what they do and they're doing a good job of it.
Yeah, I feel lots of agencies and businesses in total actually kind of ignore the speed to lead sort of element of any business. 'Cause I did some research into it a while ago, and I can't remember the exact percentage. I'm being very grey with this, but I think it was something like 30% of all people just go with the agent who just speaks to them first of all. You could be the best agent, be the worst agent, but if you're the quickest agent on the phone and say, "Hey, you did a lead 2 minutes ago," rather than 2 days ago, you've got a significantly better chance of signing up that client rather than just kind of leaving it on the side until you've got a bit of time later on in the day.
Definitely, and I think, look, it's really clear that potential buyers are messaging every agent if they see multiple properties. So you're right. If you're first to the punch, you are definitely in with a chance of getting their house on the market.
So talk me through the transition then from Spicerhaart to Purplebricks. So Purplebricks, obviously a lot more tech-driven, sort of hybrid model. What excited you most about joining Purplebricks? So the fact it's kind of sort of, I would say new and shiny, but guess new and purple, I suppose, is probably the technical term.
Yeah, look, new and purple, new and shiny, probably the right phrases, to be honest with you. Again, I looked at it as a challenge. I met up with Kenny at the time, and it was very much a blank canvas in the southern part of the world. So for me, it was a good opportunity. Again, not only I knew I could recruit, put it that way, I knew I'd be able to bring people in. But for me, it was a great opportunity to develop a new skill set because remote management is very, very difficult. Remote leadership is difficult as well. But when you're then dealing with self-employed people, it's an entirely different kettle of fish because you're basically there as a mentor guiding people. And that for me was a real great challenge that I wanted to again grasp with both hands. So luckily, obviously, look, I had Kenny to lean on for advice and mentorship at the time. But for me, it was brilliant to work with self-employed people because it's not a management role. It's very much you're a mentor, you're advising, you're guiding, you're there for support, you're there to you know challenge around what looks good for their business, what they think looks good for their business, and just give some advice. And it all stems around the right people essentially, and that was one of the things for me. I knew that I wouldn't have too much of a problem in getting in the right people. But again, it was just about making sure that they grab their opportunity because obviously, look, we're taking a lot of people from employed backgrounds and talking to them about a self-employed role. And at the time, it was a new thing. It was really fresh. So you really had to make sure that not only you talk to them around, here's the opportunity for you, but you had to deliver on it when they arrived because they'd left behind their basic salary. So they were totally reliant on the things that you would talk to them about, advise them on, and so on, in order for them to not only realize what they used to earn, but potentially more as well.
Yeah, it's funny when you look at some of the top self-employed agents sort of today, and obviously we have lots of them on the podcast. Whenever I'm doing research with them and kind of going through their LinkedIn profiles, whatever it may be, there's lots of them always have a stint in Purplebricks. Some of the ones that are sort of top self-employed agents these days usually came from some sort of Purplebricks background. So I guess that's sort of a testament to sort of that sort of time of life or the recruitment process involved there. They're actually doing so well off the back of it.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a really good grounding for people, to be honest with you, because lots of different things are in the mix there, Chris. It's not just being self-employed. It's actually where people have been in a branch environment for 10, 15 years, and then suddenly they're leaping out of bed in the morning and straight into their home office. And that can be, and it still is for some, quite a lonely place. So, you know, the part of the skill was just making sure that people felt part of something still, part of a wider picture, leveraged into as much of the contact as they wanted to, because I think most salespeople do tend to bounce off one another. There's always the odd exception that likes to go it alone, but people in the main like to be able to converse with other people in some form or another.
Looking at your roles over that time, so I'm going to try and get these all correct. So you were area sales director, managing director for the South, and then managing director for the UK sales, and then finally becoming sales director. Which one of those roles do you think was the most challenging, and why was it the most challenging?
I think for me, it was the first one I had, to be honest with you, because I suppose despite I had Kenny in the background who was a great mentor for me, but for me it was coming from a really structured environment um, where nothing really changed. To be honest with you, you knew where your your branches were, for the want of a better phrase. You knew the people in them. There was a clear process around everything. So I was thrust into a new role where not only was I recruiting self-employed people, but I was working really closely with the existing ones. So for me, it was getting my head around the fact that everybody operated their businesses slightly differently, which is fine, within the differing marketplaces that we're in, but also as well bringing people on that journey. Some people didn't jump straight away. Some people, it took a little bit of a while for them to jump on board. So probably for me, it was a mixture of two things. It was one, me getting my head around a totally different way of working. And the second one was at the same time, and whilst I was doing that, convincing people that this was the way forward and the right thing to do. And I remember having conversations with people that, self-employed estate agency will be the norm. And subsequently, 2025, it is now.
So Purplebricks was very famous for its marketing. I think of, commissary, for example. So how much did you see that working in the model, and kind of what worked really well at Purplebricks, and where did they struggle with other elements?
Yeah, I think the commissary worked brilliantly. At the time, you could move or change channels rather without seeing a commissary advert, which was brilliant. So um, all of the self-employed agents were naturally pleased with that because it gave them some brilliant valuations into their diary. It absolutely created the customer awareness. And I suppose to answer your question, what didn't work so well over there? I suppose there were probably times, Chris, where recruitment was probably a bit fierce and potentially there were too many people in a certain area. Um, and that caused the pie to be sliced a little bit thinly. So I suppose looking back on my time there, I suppose if you asked me to put a stake in the ground on what was a challenging period, I suppose there was a time when potentially there were more agents than were required in certain locations, which when you're self-employed, that's a challenge. So yeah, that was probably the one thing I can think of.
If you can go back in time and change one thing at your time at Purplebricks, I guess would it be that sort of the recruitment sort of strategy slash placement of people, or what is there anything else you would look at changing?
Yeah, I think, what could be changed. I think, yeah, certainly where there was that acceleration of recruitment and the market didn't quite keep up with that. I think absolutely we could look back at that and do something a bit differently. Yeah, I think that's probably the one, to be honest with you.
So you joined as Yopa divisional franchise director. So what sort of inspired you to go over to Yopa?
Yeah, so firstly, I'd known Verona from um, times of old when she was at Purplebricks. I'd very much stayed in contact with her, and for me, it was a great opportunity and a new challenge. I felt that I'd done what I wanted to do at Purplebricks, and I thought to myself, well, look, there's a great opportunity there. So I met with Verona and subsequently met with Steve, and for me, it was a chance to almost start something again, um, look at an opportunity that had some really good growth potential. And at the time, I wanted to look forward and think about how I could accelerate my career again. So that was a big thing for me, a really big thing for me that I wanted to do, go into a different role, hopefully within 12 to 18 months. And that was the original plan for me.
Yeah, I mean, you've worked with some brilliant people. So, I mean, you mentioned Verona there. Every time I see Verona on stage, I think, God, she's good. Like, she is really, really. There's not many people I look at on stage and they're like a level above, and I think she's absolutely amazing. And Kenny, I was at the TA UK conference slash barbecue slash summer party a while ago, and Kenny gave a speech that had everyone like wanted to like charge the beaches sort of thing. So, I mean, you've worked with some fantastic people over the time. So, talk me through the decision for Yopa to kind of launch their self-employed model. What was the kind of mindset there?
Yeah, so I think there was a gap in the market is probably a bit broad, but it's something that Yopa as a business didn't have. And clearly there is a strong market out there that we know is being filled by multiple different operators, some absolutely brilliant ones. You mentioned Kenny at TA UK there, obviously EXP, clearly the ones with the biggest market share. So as an organization, we looked at it as an opportunity for us to have a proposition for us to be able to take a share of that marketplace. Um, so yeah, we obviously launched the associate, really exciting proposition. Had some really good agents join so far. We're very much in our infancy, still very much learning, but ultimately we're starting to get a good bit of traction now. So I've been in the role now for just over 3 months, um, and it's quite good to see our profile raising. It's very challenging, as we all know. When you're going into a marketplace that's quite saturated now with self-employed propositions. And I think back to probably the challenge you asked me about was recruiting in a self-employed marketplace like 10 years ago when it wasn't the norm. Well, it now is the norm. So if you're good at what you do, you're going to have multiple different people to speak to, which is great. good self-employed operators now have got multiple choices out there, which is great, and that makes the market more competitive, which can only be a good thing, of course. Um, so for us here, it's a great opportunity to get in amongst that, devise a proposition that we believe is great, good for the agents, obviously good for us. And ultimately, over the past 3 months, we've seen some really good people jump on board. So we're really excited around the end of the year and the trajectory into 2026.
And obviously, where you've had the Countrywide, the Spicerhaart background, obviously the Purplebricks background obviously is gonna overlap with your experience there quite nicely. What are sort of the biggest learnings you've sort of come on board with Yopa and gone, "Okay, guys, this is something we really need to focus on to start off with," or this is something we need to avoid for the overall cost, whether it's the, over-recruitment in certain areas or whatever it may be. What certain things you've kind of put in place or you've thought about thinking, "Actually, almost, I don't wanna make the same mistake twice," or, "I wanna make sure we absolutely do what we did historically there."
Yeah, look, I think firstly the thing is process. I think if you're doesn't matter if you're self-employed or employed, and you'll know Chris from the time that you spend talking to our agents, it's about making sure there's the right processes in place, not only to support people in their onboarding, but just to make sure that they feel they've got um, something to hold themselves to account for. So we're very much around mentorship, very much around guidance, and for me, process has always been the key to success. Some people find it a bit of a scary word, a corporate word, dare I say. It's absolutely not. Your most successful people meticulously follow a process from start to finish. And as we know, sales processes are quite, what's the phrase, boring. They don't change, do they? If you do the right things multiple times, you'll get a good result. So for me, the most important thing has been process, whether that's making sure that our attraction proposition is great and how we work people through that, from the initial meeting through to onboarding, and then making sure that there are no times when they feel sort of left to it, for want of a better phrase. Because as I alluded to, when people work remotely, where they may have been used to, say, a branch environment, that can quite feel quite lonely very quickly, particularly as if they're dependent, obviously, on what they list is what they sell to what they exchange on in, 3, 4, 5 months time. So that's really important to me, that process element.
And, I'm always surprised, amazed, maybe disappointed, whatever the word of this is, when people take up a franchise or join a brokerage. And of the whole kind of point of you allude to there is to say, you join a franchise or a brokerage because they kind of got a winning formula. This is like the Yopa way, just kind of just do this basically. We've done the hard work for the last X amount of years to work all this out sort of thing. Just kind of just copy this system we've put in place. How do you ensure that people follow that process rather than going, I know you're saying that, A squared plus B squared equals C squared, but what about, hear me out, if we said like C squared plus D squared equals F squared? Like, how do you make sure that people don't try and reinvent the wheel and kind of go, actually, this is the way we should do it because this is going to work for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it comes through building relationships and spending time with people, but also showing them, who's doing it and what works and why it works. And it's typically down to the process that they should be following. And look, I'm a salesperson at heart, and we always think that we can think of something new and it's going to be brilliant and shiny. But actually, when you go back to the original process, the original basics, those are the things that work. So, trying to support people, trying to give them the right guidance, nearly all of that comes from building the right relationships with them. You can never ever um, give somebody advice and then never have anything to do with them. And by that, I mean, one of the things I'm really passionate about is spending time with people, whether we're, in a coffee shop, whether we're in a meeting room, whether we're in evaluation, just around things that I think might help them. And but equally for me, it's about making sure that they feel they've got that support as and when they need it. So it's a mixture of mediums like this, but also going out and seeing people. And it's like anything, isn't it? The more you invest in someone, the more time you spend with them, they'll typically listen to what you've got to say. But importantly as well, if you introduce them to other self-employed brokers who are doing a brilliant job, then naturally they'll pick up a bit of peer-to-peer mentorship as well.
Hmm. Yeah, I think always think it's really important to have that. So the peer-to-peer side of things is that it's all well and good, sort of, people who aren't necessarily on the front line saying, "Oh, you should be doing this and you should be doing that."
Yeah.
But there's also a big element of someone who is literally in the patch next to you, who's having a really good business sort of thing, saying, "Actually, I did do that and that does work." So I think it kind of carries extra sort of gravitas because they're kind of doing the doing effectively.
Yeah, definitely. 100%.
Fab. So where do you sit with regard to a sort of experience versus non-experience? So if I came to you and I said, Tom, I've been selling cars for the last 15 years or so, but I've had enough of cars. I can't stand the exhaust fumes and I want to try something different. Would that be a conversation you would entertain at Yopa, or would you say to me you need to have experience in the estate agency world? What's your kind of viewpoint on that?
Certainly within the associate, I think we'd absolutely entertain a conversation. Of course we would, because I think there's two ways of looking at it, Chris, to be honest with you. Um, Being quite candid, the amount of people that I've seen come into the self-employed world with 15, 20 years experience, and they're not done as well as they'd expected or we'd expected. And look, it's a two-way street. We've got to reflect and think, well, actually, that's potentially our fault as much as it is yours. It's never, it's not the blame game. It's just not worked. Um, and conversely, there's been some situations where people have come in with some really limited experience and absolutely flown. I think it's fair to say that, whilst estate agency does have its complexities, it's not particularly difficult to learn, to be honest with you. The experience comes typically from on the job. Experience can come from, having that peer-to-peer mentorship, from having conversations with the likes of myself. So, in answer to your question, somebody with limited experience, of course, we would entertain a conversation with, because ultimately they might have an incredible background in a totally other field, a different field, with lots of transferable skills. And then the onus is on us to make sure that we give them all the process and knowledge gaps that we can possibly give them, because ultimately, if you're working in a customer sales environment, and you're dealing with customers on a day-to-day basis, it's just around us helping you transform that skill set into a property one. Whether you come from, you might have been selling, websites, you might have been selling cars, to your point, but ultimately, I think there's always that transferable skill to look at. So, absolutely, would we ever just say no? Sorry, you haven't got the right level of experience? Of course, we wouldn't. We would absolutely entertain a conversation with anybody.
And what have you seen? I'm going to go glass half empty here, if that's okay. So the agents that come through that have got 15, 20 years, for example, and don't necessarily get the results that they expect or hoped, or you would have hoped for them, sort of thing. Where are they going wrong? What's the shortcoming there that is stopping them from sort of living up to their full potential?
I think sometimes when they've come from an environment where they've been used to getting leads that have just, say, landed on the desk or landed in the diary, for the want of a better phrase, it can give you an expectation that that's just going to happen in the self-employed brokerage world. And in reality, within the associate, it's just not. You've got to be out there. You've got to be getting your hands dirty, and you've got to go and hunt for the valuations. You've got to hunt for your leads, whether that's through having a fantastic social media campaign, whether it's being loud and proud on, LinkedIn, canvassing, door knocking, all those things. And unfortunately, we do find from time to time that people will enter the self-employed brokerage model and potentially not um, want to go out and hunt and gather as much as they initially thought they would do.
Hmm. So do you think it's a lack of, I don't know, more of an estate agent mindset rather than an estate agency mindset? So you're kind of you're great at valuing and listing and selling and doing the deal sort of thing, but it's more kind of the piece around that, the lead generation, the marketing, etc., that gets you to show off. You think it's probably a bit of a shortcoming there.
Definitely, definitely, and it's really interesting. Sometimes in times of old, if I think back over my career, I've worked with some absolutely brilliant, brilliant agents who have. If you get them in front of 10 customers, they'll get you 6 instructions. And then when you ring them when their diary's a little bit light, their first reaction is, my diary's light, my diary's light. If I can get vowels and I could get instructions. And you say, well, okay, what have you done about the lack of valuations in your diary? And you're met with either not a lot or a really vague answer. So you've probably hit the nail on the head, actually. It's around that, being that self-publicist, marketing yourself in your local area and doing all the things that are going to generate leads, potentially not today, not even this week, not even this month, but to sustain you for over the coming months, particularly if you've just started a new business.
So for anybody sitting and listening or watching this today thinking, oh, this self-employed malarkey might be for me and I might, next year, 2026 or 27 might go for it sort of thing. What should they be thinking about? Should they be exploring? What should they be kind of getting ready to do? What sort of steps they should be going through sort of today in the next 6 months or so to get them ready for next year, let's say, for example?
Well, there's a couple of things, actually. I think obviously they should be talking to the different brokerage models in the marketplace. That's the first thing to do, is make sure that you give yourself the right variety of differing models to talk to. I think you should probably not just talk to the likes of myself. You should talk to the agents that are actually doing it. So again, there's full transparency in our industry around who's working for which model. So you can go and look on the website. So anybody, I just urge you to pick up the phone to some of the agents that you might see on the websites and have a conversation with them around how they found it, how they're finding it now. Ask them around the challenges because look, everybody can paint a really rosy picture, but that's not reality. You need to know, you know, what it's like when the going gets tough, any big challenges people have had and how to overcome them. Um, and I suppose the other thing is just making sure that you're set up for success because it's fair to say that if I think about what we do at the associate is that we obviously make sure that the people have got the right mentorship in place. We make sure that they can leverage into as much support as they could possibly want, whether that's from the webinars that we do with the likes of yourself, Chris, or the ones with Simon. It's about making sure that we give people that level of support. So whilst they started their new business, they know that they've always got somebody or something to leverage into. So if you're looking at doing something like this, it's important to partner up with a brokerage model that gives you that support, gives you that something to give you that little bit of inspiration is probably the right phrase, and somebody to talk to around your business. And ultimately, look, the other thing is clearly around the financial viability, because clearly, if you're leaving a world where you've got a great basic salary, good commission structure, and you're going to be earning nothing for the first couple of months, then you need to think about how you can plan to overcome that. And again, thinking back to some of the things that we've done here, we've got a couple of our um, business owners now that are doing some wonderful things with some upfront marketing fees that are allowing them to get some good early income into their business that are seeing them, have that early cash flow coming in, which is so, so important when somebody's going out there and being self-employed. So yeah, that would be my advice to somebody that sat here now thinking 2026 is the year for me to go self-employed. Just put yourself about a bit. Speak to the people in the industry. Speak to the people doing the do. And importantly, make sure that you've got some form of plan in place around your cash flow and your financial viability. And obviously, look, that's what people like myself are in place for, to make sure I give as much support and guidance. So that would be my advice, Chris.
Amazing. I love the shopping around bit. I'm always amazed the lack of shopping around that happens when it comes to brokerage side. I talk to a lot of people who are looking to go self-employed or might be self-employed or think about in the future, and a lot of people are like, "Oh yeah, I spoke to one brokerage because I saw a screenshot of their pipeline on LinkedIn." And you think to yourself, "You shopped around at all? You spoken to anyone else and see what's good, see what's bad, to compare them again?" Not really. And I think to myself, you're literally probably going to business with these people for the next like 5 years, 10 years, however long you would want to do it for. I'd be pretty sure that it was the right placement to fit into. So, yeah, I think absolutely your advice with regard to shopping around and having a chat with the people on the ground, 100%, I see that as a right way to go. So, final question, because you've been very generous with your time today. Where do you see the self-employed agency side of things going? If we fast forwarded 3 years, 5 years, is it turning slowly into America? Where do you see the future?
Look, I think it's absolutely the future. I think it's just going to continue to accelerate and grow. I mean, look at the models that are entering the marketplace. We're seeing some traditional high street estate agencies look to try and move their model into a self-employed one. We're seeing some employed businesses start their own self-employed brokerage models. I think absolutely the general public, and certainly from what we see, they want to have that personal estate agent. So whether that's going to be completely like America is another matter. But certainly in the UK, we've seen a fantastic evolution over the past 10 years, it's fair to say, and that's only going to accelerate moving forward now. Um, General public have shown that they want to work with self-employed estate agents. Estate agencies absolutely evolving down that path at a rate of knots that I've not seen before. But also as well, um, to my earlier point, it's now become the norm. So when you speak to people, whether I contact them via LinkedIn or they've contacted me or however that's worked, um, you don't really have to sell the self-employed element anymore. It's more about what support they're going to have. Um, how can we help them with their fee policy, whatever that might be. How we can help them with their marketing campaign. So talking to people around that self-employed hurdle is still there to a degree, but it's nowhere near like it was 10 years ago. So um, I think it's absolutely become the norm. It's a really exciting time, and I can just see it, accelerating over the next 5, 10 years to new heights in the UK.
Tom, thank you so much for your time. It's been really appreciated.
Thank you, Chris.